I guess for those listening, my name is Carter Good. I have been working in the fitness industry probably since like 2016. Started with I was in college, then I dropped out of college and joined an internship working for like a bigger fitness company that does like information products. And from there, started to gain a lot of interest. And I know you said that we'll talk about my weight loss story because that's obviously what got me into fitness. But that kind of got me down the road of like internet marketing and then learning about online coaching. And so I was in the internship for 6 months. I moved back home and spent about a year and a half building up my business to posting content, kind of doing the thing that a lot of coaches do, mostly centered around like weight loss stuff, like more like fitness lifestyle kind of stuff, I would say. And yeah, that's kind of what I've been doing ever since then. I've gone through several iterations of the business, from like just being myself to then having like a bigger team doing like the scaling model, like the Hormonal type of a thing, to realizing I hated my life doing that. And then basically cutting ties with everyone. And then now I'm just kind of back to coaching myself and focusing a lot more on just like actually enjoying life. So
you're still coaching then?
Yeah. So like I do like all like one-on-one now, but and I actually had a business partner for a lot of my business career, but we're actually slowly parting ways, not on bad terms, but just like shifting things. And because I kind of want to just shift into just doing things like really just on my own, as lean and sort of less moving parts as possible.
Dude, it's super funny because I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of other coaches, and it seems very much like everyone has the same arc. Everyone has the same arc. Everyone somehow starts to get popular on their own. Like they start to make a name for themselves. Like they start getting a little bit overwhelmed, like the amount of attention and inquiries and clients that they're working with. And then they scale really fast. They bring on a big team. They start to hire a bunch of assistant coaches. They hire like sales teams. They hire like admins. They start to, like you said, like that traditional model. And then they realize they hate their life doing that shit. Mm-hmm. And then they tract all the way back into where it's just them. And then they rebrand and they start to do things their own way, the way they want to do it. But it just seems like the same arc, just with a little bit different patterns here and there on it. And I've been the same. Like it's been the same exact thing for me. Where like I started off just me, and that was whenever we met.
Yeah. 2018. 2018 is probably when we met.
Yeah, we met way back in the day. And I don't know. I think that you were a little bit ahead of me in the whole like business well, maybe not a little bit, maybe a lot of it in the whole business process. But back then I was like super fucking overwhelmed. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then I started trying to scale everything, and I was like, well, I can just outrun everything. I'm going to scale as fast as possible, get to a point where like this is like a self-sustaining machine, and then I'm just going to take a step back and like be the puppet master and oversee everything, and I'm never going to have to work again, and I'm going to be like a millionaire. And I don't know if it's the same for you, but I just expected things to get easier, and they only got harder.
Yeah, well, I think it's a skill set, right? And this is where I think there's a fundamental difference between like being an entrepreneur and being a business owner, right? Because I don't think that they're not mutually exclusive. And we have a lot of friends who have
an entrepreneur and a CEO.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And we have a lot of friends who run companies that teach coaches how to scale and do this. And the thing with it is that our friends who do this are really good at doing that. Like they're really good at helping somebody get to that point. And I think that, and this is probably what a lot of people are experiencing with that arc, is that, you can get there, but like, you don't really know until you get there how it's going to feel. Right. And especially for me, I've been really fortunate to like never had like a real job my entire life. Like I worked for my stepdad, but that was even like commission based. Like I never had like a 9-to-5 job where I go somewhere, there are things or meetings and all this. And so like for me, like the pressure of like being responsible for employees, which I will say like it's fun the enjoyable part of it was being able to like create a lifestyle for the employees, right? And a lot of my coaches could do what I could have done, right? Whenever I first got started, as far as like freedom of time and that. But the other stuff of like managing expectations and to be completely honest with you, like just a simple like meeting on the calendar, like created so much stress and anxiety for me that it was almost like embarrassing how much anxiety. It was like ridiculous almost. Like I would look at my calendar and be like, oh, I have to have a sales huddle this morning, and then I have to have a coaches meeting, then this and this. And like, even if it was just like 2 meetings, like if one meeting was at 11 a.m. and one was at like 2 p.m., like I can't do anything in between there. And like it destroyed my creative process. And it's also, so I also think too that like, people start businesses for different reasons, but what it all taught me was the recognition that, I think we all want to make money, and I think that's the collective goal, right? But for me, what I care a lot more about is just choice, right? Just like being able to decide what I want to do, and I can wake up and then decide. Like that freedom to me is what is really valuable, and it took kind of going through that experience to get there. But now I appreciate it so much more, and so I wouldn't change anything. But I do, learning that has been a huge step for me in terms of just like actually enjoying what I do again.
Yeah, no, I like how you put that. And I think I would probably classify myself as similar. I've gone through different iterations myself with what I feel like I value the most. There have been times whenever I'm like, I would answer for sure I value money the most. There are times whenever I would say success, even though success is kind of like hard to define. There are other times whenever I would say, like, I value freedom more, or I value like the freedom of choice to be able to do whatever I want to do. There are other times I might say like I value status, right? Like I'm just like I want other people to think that I'm successful. And all of those are a little bit arbitrary, and a lot of them are somewhat vague, but well, maybe not the money aspect. That's you can kind of measure that. But I feel like for myself personally, it's been like this weird cycle of having a moving target as what I deem to be like the most valued or like the primary goal for myself. And it's slowly starting to refine back towards kind of like what you mentioned, where I like that choice. I like to be able to do the things that I want to do. So everything else kind of is a means to an end to that. So whether it's like success or status or money, like whatever can kind of buy me the time to be able to do the things that I actually enjoy doing, which I'm slowly starting to figure out as well. I really like to travel. I really like to just like write. I like to be creative. I like to create things. I like to be able to sit and fucking think about deep things, like deep thoughts, because that's something that I feel like a lot of people don't have an opportunity to do. It's just like, and like whatever. Just I want to go back to the business thing because it is interesting. But like, what do you feel like was your weakness in business as like the CEO or like the business owner?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was like setting vision and then like setting appropriate expectations for employees in that vision, right? Easily the most, because that's what brought me the most stress. And even like when I've talked to like my employees in the past, or even whenever they were working with me, like I was, in my mind, my thought was they want me to be completely hands off. They want to be in their own world. Like I kind of treated them as if they were their own individual little entrepreneurs, right? Because that's how I am, right? And what it did was it caused a lot of anxiety for them too, because there wasn't a lot of like, future pacing of like, here's what the plan for the next month, here's the plan for the next 6 months, a year, or whatever. And they would constantly question me on it, which would make me super stressed and frustrated. And then, I wouldn't give them answers on things. And I would say that's probably, it's really to be honest, the leadership component of running a business, right? That's probably the biggest thing. It was just like being able to actually take a bunch of people and like focus on one mission together. Cause I think that for me, I'm ready to jump ship at any moment with like new opportunities and things, right? Like, of course I'll see things through, but I also approach business. Since I'm not trying to build an enterprise, I'm not trying to build this like legacy in a sense. Like I, am doing this right now, but in 2 years I could see myself almost doing something completely different. Right. And I think that fundamentally, would cause unsturdiness in the business, which, ultimately kind of led to its demise in a sense.
It's funny. I've actually struggled with similar things. I have this kind of like head in the stars type of vibe to me where like I'm always really the next thing that's going to like pique my interest or like get me excited. And what I find exciting is taking something and going from like 0 to 1, right? Going from that nothing stage to, all right, now we have something, and this something is like pretty fucking cool, and this something might be something bigger in the future. I have realized I'm not that great at scaling. I'm not great at going from like 1 to 100 or one to 1,000, but it's my issue, I think, is more of like a managerial one. Like, I'm good with people, but similar to you, I'm not good with like managing expectations, mostly because like my expectations for people are, you are all mini me's. You all value the same things that I do. You're all going to work this with the same intensity that I am. You're going to go or attempt to go above and beyond. You're going to be frustrated with stasis, you know, like all of those things. And I was not good at communicating those expectations to people as well. So whenever people would inevitably not live up to the expectations that I had because they were impossible, I would get frustrated and I would get really annoyed with people. And then all of a sudden it was like, all right, now I'm just done with you. Like you might have gone, you know? So I feel like my issues were very managerial. And that's for me why it's been important in our business to have someone who can be more of like that people person, who can be like that liaison that will handle the people, that will be like the manager. I'm better as like, I don't want to say like I hate it to use terms of like the visionary, right? Like being someone who can like be a little bit like higher up, think about things that we need to do, kind of like direct and point, make sure that like the company's steering in the right direction and just like get things moving that way. But I'm not good at like handling all the minutia day to day and like being the manager and being the business owner. Like I've gotten better over time, but there's a reason why certain people are just fucking bosses at being CEOs or CMOs. You know, it's like, it's crazy how good certain people are at being like behind the scenes puppet masters. Like they just know how to do that shit and they know how to get people motivated. And I've found out slowly that I don't know if that's me. Maybe I'm just selling myself short there in terms of business, but like, do you feel similar to that?
Well, what I think it is, I think it's like, you know, we could do anything, right? Like it's more about like, what are we actually going to do? And that's where for me, like, I mean, cause I bought books on leadership. I was going to like go to this conference on it too. But like, for me, the problem was like, there was such little interest in developing. And that's where I think, you know, in order to be somebody who's going to, you know, build a multi-million-dollar, you know, company, like you kind of have to be somebody who's like, you will do anything to get to that point. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so I recognize that like, it's not that I'm lazy. It's just that based on what I value, like I'm not willing to like do something that I don't want to do in a sense. Right. Or develop a skill like that because like, it's not important enough to me. Right. Because even going back to like, why do we start a business? Like with money, for example, like money is important to me, but only to the point where like now I don't think about money. Right. And I don't like live a lifestyle where like I have like Lamborghinis and things like this. Right. But my goal has always been to like never have to think about it. Right. Go out to dinner. I don't need to look at the check. I think that's always been my goal. Right. And to get there, you don't need to do this other thing. And so I had this constant battle of like, especially too in Austin where I live, I'm surrounded by all these high performance people who are scaling their businesses, who do have more of that mindset. And so I think what kept me stuck in it was, I think I knew a long time ago that like, it wasn't for me, but I'm like, but everyone else around me is doing this. So I got to do it too. And if I can't do it, then I'm gonna be this, you know, failure in a sense. And I also think too, like you kind of mentioned earlier, how like I was maybe like ahead. I think that there was a period of time where I felt like people think that I are like looking up to me and think that I haven't figured out. And so I need to maintain this like persona or this like, you know, whatever it is of being this highly successful person who's like, you know, way ahead in a sense. But then, you know, once I could detach from that, which has taken a lot of time, and I'd say it's still something I kind of struggle with, but not nearly as much as I did. Like that's whenever I could actually sit down and be like, oh, this all sucks. And I pulled the plug pretty quickly. So
no, and again, it's a lot of managing expectations, but also perceptions too. That was something that I've kind of struggled with, because trying to figure out what is actually my own drives, my own needs for those successes versus what I feel like I'm trying to live up to from other people. Again, like that status thing, right? So it's like, am I chasing my own success or am I chasing someone else's perception of my success? And I think whenever I started to realize that, it was a lot easier for me to kind of like fall into the place that I needed to be and be comfortable with that. And I actually do appreciate a lot with what you said about just being comfortable with money, in the sense that you don't have to worry about money. It's like money as the means to an end rather than money being like the end point. Whereas like some people, they like money is the sole driver for them. They see their bank account and they're like, I want to add another zero. But it's like, what are you going to do with that fucking money? Like,
insidious.
Yeah, it's like you could have $100 million and that's dope. But like, if you go from 100 million to a billion, like, what are you doing with that money? Like, you have to have something else that's driving you, because as at a certain point, it's like more money it doesn't mean anything. It's just more. So, I mean, I guess certain people have like philanthropic wants, like they want to give back and they want to be able to like provide at a higher level and do more things with their money. And I think that's super noble. But yeah, like at a more medium level, you have to have something that's driving you that is not just purely money. It's like there needs to be something internal, intrinsic to you that's pushing you to like continue to wake up every day and like be driven and like try to build something that is like bigger than what you have. That's difficult though. It takes a lot of fucking energy, and it takes something more than motivation. Like, you can't rely on motivation purely. You have to actually want to do those things, because if not, you'll get to like that moderate level of success and just like chill. Like, all right, this is all I need. I don't need to do anything else.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, like I kind of dipped into that because it's been like, figuring out sort of like, where do I want to spend my time? Like, what gets me up and excited about things? And it's, I realized that with what I was doing, like I actually wasn't even like putting myself in situations to figure out what that was. Right. And so like, because I always felt, and I don't know if you struggled with this, like, and even today, like I struggle with sometimes feeling like, oh, I'm not doing enough. I'm not busy enough. Right. I'm trying to like fill my time with all these things. But over the last like, several months, I've spent probably less time working than I ever have in my life. And what it's allowed for is you kind of talked about like being able to sit around and think is not, and I can resonate a lot with that. Like, it made me realize I don't sit around and just think about things around like what do I want to do, or like ideas and all of that, especially when you're kind of sucked into like the business mode type of things. And so allowing myself space to like not be so stressed about like, oh, is this going to work a year from now or 2 years from now, or am I, whatever it is, to actually use this time to be like, hey, you can coast right now, but instead of being like complacent, being able to get comfortable so that I kind of have the space to like think more about what is the next thing, if there is a next thing, or can I do something when I'm like what I'm doing now but differently, and all of that. And so kind of getting out of the rat race in a sense, and focusing more on like, which I guess path do I actually want to take, instead of just following one till it gets to the top. Yeah.
Like, the value of deep thought, I think is so fucking underrated, because we're so used to like always being go, 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 having like a jam-packed schedule, seeing like, all right, call at 10, meeting at 10:30, client work 10:30 to or 11 to like 1. It's just like bam, 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 bam. There's always something to do. But like, just being able to sit down, close your eyes, think, or just look at a problem for multiple hours at a time, or just sit down and like write and draft up an article, draft up a proposal, or whatever the fuck you want to do, but just be undistracted and allow your brain to like kind of settle into whatever problem that you're trying to figure out. It's honestly hard to articulate like how useful that can be, especially whenever you're trying to do hard things. Like, like doing hard things or solving hard problems, it requires like actually being able to use your fucking brain. And I know that sounds so basic, but you can't use your brain if you're always distracted and always from one thing to the next. You can't think deeply. And I'm sure a lot of people can like resonate with that, and they understand like what I'm saying without maybe even understanding what I'm saying, or maybe being able to feel that. But whenever I previously was in just like this go, go, go mode all the time, just always stressed, always anxious, I realized it was so hard for me to actually like settle into like a deep thought pattern, because my brain was not used to it. Like, my brain was just so used to being like surface level and everything and not actually working very hard. It was like, all right, like I can get really simple problems done that I'm very like technical at, like I'm very good at solving these specific problems. But whenever it came to like anything that I wasn't very comfortable with, like anything business related, it's like, all right, like, we have this big problem in the business that is going to take a little bit of time to deal with, or like this next pivot that we need to make, that we're going to like keep up with whatever direction the industry is going in. like, what do we need to do? Like, how do we go about doing this? Like, how do we stay ahead? Like, all of a sudden you actually have to like kind of think abstractly, and like abstract thinking requires really just like settling in and blocking off your calendar and like closing your blinds and not allowing yourself to be distracted. But once I realized that, and I started like planning like full days of no real work, like I was like, all right, Saturdays, I'm not going to have anything on my schedule. I'm not going to do any client work. I'm not going to have anything that is like distracting. Even just like sitting down and like laying on the couch, just chilling and reading a book. It's like, you'll have these like weird epiphanies where it's like, oh shit, how did I never fucking think of this before? You know?
Yeah.
Once those light bulbs go off, it's like almost hard to get them to stop going off.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I think, and this is sort of still in line with what we're talking about, but I also think another reason why that can be difficult too, is especially whenever you put yourself in a situation where you're allowing yourself leisure time and just like time to just kind of do nothing and think. I think that for me, the problems that created is sort of brought to the surface, maybe even like problems that were affecting business, but maybe even more related to like personal problems. Like it kind of like, as soon as you eliminate distraction, the things that are, the biggest problems in your life, which can be business, but could also be personal, whatever. And when you're a business owner, obviously they all kind of tie together, can start to face you. And then, so like, I think that's another reason why a lot of people maybe don't do it. And it's why, I've struggled to do it, and I still do, and definitely gotten better in the last several months, from things that we'll talk about. But I think that's another thing that is there. It's like, not a lot of people are comfortable in that situation because it feels like, not only are you not it doesn't feel like immediate progress, but I also think it makes you have to like really reevaluate what you have been doing, which can go down a whole other rabbit hole of like decision making for yourself that can, even span outside of business. At least that was the case for me.
Yeah. A lot of highly driven people are really busy and stay really busy, not just because they're highly driven, but also because they kind of have some ghosts too. They're like, all right, I want to,
Yeah,
I'm not thinking about all of this shit that I would otherwise have to address if I was not busy. No, I've actually been there. I've been there before. Sometimes like keeping yourself distracted is the only way to avoid thinking about the shit that you actually should be thinking about though. Like, we will talk about this, but a lot of times, if it's something that is like under the surface, eventually it's going to bubble up. You're going to have to address it at some point. So you can only distract yourself from that issue for so long. Granted, like maybe short-term distractions aren't that bad if you're like grieving or something, but other times, if it's like a relationship issue, or if it's like, some other personal issue, or if it's, some shit that you've just been like waiting to deal with for fucking ever and you just keep pushing it off, like distractions will only go so far, especially like business distractions, because in that way, you're kind of handicapping yourself in two areas. In business, you're not allowing yourself to like really take advantage of the brain power that you bring to the table. And then the personal side, or like, the non-business side, you're not really addressing certain shit that would potentially help you take it back over to the business, or just in general in your life, if you were to just eliminate that off your plate, but no, that's actually a good opening, because now we can start talking about some of like the more personal life stuff, I guess. The weight loss thing, that is personal life. It kind of ties into fitness, but we talked before we got on here, before we started recording, about how we've known each other for fucking ever. I know about your weight loss journey, but I don't really know like the details of it. I don't know how.
Yeah.
So like, dude, just walk me through that, like what that looked like, how you actually got to that point of needing to go through that weight loss transformation. And then like, what was the impetus for actually getting yourself through that?
Yeah. No. So for me, I grew up in like Southern Ohio. So, close to, then you're in Columbus still. So like, pretty close in that area, but you kind of know the general feel of maybe a small town Ohio, right? Like not super healthy. And it's, more in the country and stuff. And just growing up, most of my family, like not my immediate family, but my extended family, struggle with their weight. And so it was very much that sort of a situation. But, like I growing up was always just a little bit overweight, and I always had like a very interesting like relationship with food. And it's actually something I'm very interested in, because even today, how I think about food is a lot different than like a lot of my friends who are like naturally like don't struggle at all with their weight, right? And things, which makes me wonder like how much of like, just genetics and whatever plays a role in like how your body thinks about food. But again, like struggled my weight most of my life. And then whenever I was 15, so also growing up, so my dad's a pastor of this very small town, right? And my mom is, she's kind of like the person in the small town. Like she was like the star athlete. She like holds records for track. She like went to college full time for track and volleyball, right? So my parents are kind of like in the small town, like, oh, we know who the good families are, right? Or who the good family is. So they were sort of like the picture perfect marriage in a sense, right? Like three boys, we go to church on Sunday, our last name's good, all this stuff. And what's funny is like growing up, my parents never argued or anything. Like it just seemed like a very picture perfect kind of situation, right? But whenever I was 15, my parents like sat me and my brothers down and they said they were getting a divorce, right? And I think that like, a lot of parents get divorced, but I think in that situation, I think it was such a breach of just understanding of reality. Because like my parents would literally like, they would have people come to the house who were struggling in their marriage and they would counsel them, right? And then you're like, wait a minute, what the heck, right? And then I had this whole thing of, and this is actually another super interesting topic around like religion too, about how like my entire life I never believed once that there was a God and like this whole thing. And so I always sort of felt like, not that I was like being pressured into it, but like always a little bit like shameful or guilty that like I wasn't, like everyone else in this sense. And so when my parents got divorced and initially like my thing was like, what the fuck? Like you guys are just going to do this. And like, I've been suppressed my whole life. And so like, I went from 15 until I was like 16, I gained like 100 pounds. So it's like clear, like, how did I cope with this? Right. And so I got up to my heaviest weight as at just right over 300 pounds. And so for most of my high school career, that's kind of where I sat, was like right over 300 pounds. And, I think also the fact that like with it being such a small town, like I was very much like I wasn't partying or doing any things, and it was kind of very isolating too. And so like I didn't have like a lot of peer pressure to change it or change it or anything. But whenever I did decide to lose weight, it's just such a stupid cliche thing, but there was a girl who I thought I had like this connection with or whatever. It was kind of like the first girl I ever felt safe, like, leading into, and I thought that she was giving me signs or whatever. And then like hardcore friend zone mode, right? Understandably. But then that though was another one of these moments where it's like, all right, my parents got divorced and then this thing happened. And I was just like so pissed off that I'm like, fuck this girl, I'm going to lose this weight. And so I started like, I think I went on bodybuilding.com and I found Steve Cook's Big Man on Campus article, and I took his cutting diet and I just cut it in half. So I was probably eating like 1,200 calories, I guess, right? And lost weight very quickly. And then after like losing like 30 pounds, it kind of switched to this thing of like, oh, wait a minute, this is like something I'm good at, right? Like I felt like I really took that owner. I was like, oh man, like this is exciting. It's something I feel like I'm making progress with, and I'm good at this. And so, everybody who's ever been in the fitness industry or been into fitness, right, for themselves or whatever, there's like that 1 to 2 year period of time whenever you first get into fitness where it's literally all that you think about. It's all you care about. All you're reading about. Like I'm watching like Christian Guzman on YouTube. I'm watching. They were called the Hodge twins. I think they're like conservative.
They are. They're
the comedians now.
Yeah, like political pundits now. Yeah.
The reason I know that is because my mom, my stepdad, they're sweet people and everything, but they're kind of like a little bit like Fox News kind of people, right? And so she showed me once. She's like, oh my gosh, you would think these guys are so funny, and she put them on the TV, and I'm like, what the fuck? It was like the Hodge twins. Don't you guys talk about fitness? So. But yeah, I was very much.
They were like fitness YouTubers, and then they were comedians, and then they're like now political authorities. Who fucking
weirdos. But anyways, so I got very obsessed with it, and then went through that whole thing, and it was like right at the end of high school, whenever I was sort of at like I had lost the most weight that I had ever lost, like 145 pounds, and then I went off to college and. For most people, college is awesome. But for me, it was maybe the worst period of time in my life. Like a lot of it's self-imposed, but I think it's because just from my upbringing and like not really having much of a social life, and kind of always feeling restricted a bit, like going off to college and having that freedom, I didn't really know what to do with it. And then you tie on top of that my fear of, at that point, I'm still afraid, like, I'm going to gain all this weight back. Like, I don't have that trust yet in myself. And so I really just like isolated myself. So I was like the kid in the cafeteria eating like boiled eggs and like, and I also had to eat on the meal plan, which freaked me the fuck out at that time in my life. Cause I was so used to like tracking my macros, having like my scale, all this stuff. And so like, this is a very stressful time, but kind of through that, that's whenever I started getting introduced to more of like the nutritional science. So like I found like Alan Aragon around that time, like Lane Norton, like those types of guys, and actually started learning about, nutrition and like body composition stuff. And then I would say honestly, and there was not really a moment where, because people always, come to me who like talk about like, how did you heal your relationship with food or do a lot of these things? And I mean, for me, it was honestly just like knowledge and information. And like the more I learned about food really helped. And so, yeah, that was kind of it. And then obviously was still very interested in that, which kind of took me down the path of like, I would see guys like, there's this old school like fitness marketer. His name is Rusty Moore, and probably maybe one person knows of him. So he has this company. He had the Fitness Black Book, which is like 2008, and it was he kind of like brought the whole like workout like nutrition PDF thing into the world, right? Okay. And so I was really into him, but I started to get into the business side of him too. I'm like, oh, this is awesome how he's doing this, and so started blogging and stuff, and that's how I eventually got into the fitness coaching stuff. But we already talked about that. But yeah, that's kind of the weight loss story in itself. Yeah.
No, so did you ever have like any issues after you lost all that weight initially where you started to kind of rebound, or like you gained some weight back, or like once it was off, did it just fucking stay off and you just did a good job of like keeping it off?
Yeah, I think, it stayed off. And I think one of the major reasons it did, to be honest, is because at that point, my life was so much about fitness. And then like, even now, like, maybe knowing myself, I'm a very like anal person, very like, so like I probably would not have allowed it, because it was also one of these things where it felt like the first real accomplishment in my life, because it happened at a very pivotal age too, of like 15 to 17, 18, right? And so it was like this, and like the feedback I was getting from like girls, getting more attention from girls, and like, all that kind of stuff. But I think the fact that like I stayed in the world after I lost weight, like really helped me personally stay at a healthy body weight. I also think it pushed back some of maybe the more personal problems that were related to the weight gain issues to begin with. But I think that helped me kind of keep it off.
Yeah. Like you mentioned that you really started getting into like the nutrition science, the food science aspect of it once you got into college. That even with like the initial weight loss, were you like training, or was it really just like strictly diet at the very beginning, and then you just slowly started integrating like the training like component later on?
Yeah, I think once I started to go through that like self-obsessed phase of weight loss, where you're like looking at yourself in the mirror every day and like that's whenever, and I started watching more stuff, like I started to realize, oh, I should be working out too. And so I'm actually like, I stumbled upon like lifting weights. Also my dad lifted weights too. And so like it was nice to have him like sort of like tell me, hey, you should start lifting weights too. And so I was really fortunate that I actually started doing it like pretty early on in like the weight loss journey, which I know helped a ton probably with like getting leaner, and then also being able to keep it off, just, from being in a better position metabolically with having more muscle. So.
Now, so you did mention like some of the things that you were kind of maybe suppressing after the weight loss. So like, what are some of those things that you're referring to?
Yeah, I think, man, this is the rabbit hole. There's a lot of them. I think that, definitely the divorce thing, but I think that it got even bigger than that, because I think that there have been a lot of things growing up, especially around religion and kind of being a pastor's kid and things, and kind of living in this situation where like, you don't hold the same belief as everybody else, but you're put in a position to where like you are supposed to be bought into it entirely, right? And for me, I think that like, because one of my biggest ongoing things that has always come up in therapy, and is really like the the fuel behind a lot of like the decisions I make has always been like avoidance of like shame and disappointment, right? And a lot of people pleasing has come from that, right? And I think that like those are the things that even after I like lost weight and then I grew a following, like I was still sort of crippled by in a lot of ways, which then kind of showed up in like relationships. I think it's even showed up like in business with how I built businesses, right? Like kind of like not wanting to disappoint people and, you know, have shame around people and things like that. But those are some of the bigger things. I kind of forgot your question. I want to make sure I'm moving in the right direction.
No, you're good though. You're good. Like just talking about like some of the impacts of like the post weight loss journey and like some of the things that you're suppressing, potentially like needed to really address, but we're maybe using like the weight loss as a means to avoid addressing. And like this doesn't even really have to be like physiological. Oh, I know that, dude. I know that like you and I had talked previously about like some of the like hormonal issues that you were having even like years after the weight loss. And that's, I don't think something that people necessarily think of whenever they are a bit heavier, but even going through like a weight loss journey. But like you can obviously go into as much depth about something like that as you want to, because I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but like, you know, there are repercussions that people don't necessarily think of whenever there is a large shift in lifestyle like that.
Yeah. And that's actually, so I would say, so two things, maybe one psychological, one physiological, because that just reminded me of things. As far as like the psychological stuff goes, like I think that weight loss gave me an identity for the first time in my life, right? And that's why I think I leaned on it so heavily. And even at points now, like have like some resentment around some fitness stuff. I think just because of like I was doing it at a point where there were so many unhealthy things going on in my head that like that's what I needed, right? But I would say that, but also physiologically, that's a really big one. Is like I think that I, for most of my life, did struggle with or started with like my hormone health and stuff, and like always had low testosterone. And I even wonder sometimes like I assume that may even have played a role in like not being able to like maintain a healthy, because like, to be honest, and even to this day, and now I'm not sure if I've even told you, I'm actually on TRT now.
We were talking about it. Yeah.
Just awesome. Just freaking into right. But like, I still had like a super fast metabolism, but like after I had lost weight, I remember I went in to get my blood results done. And I'm trying to remember the reason why I did it. I can't remember, but no, I think it was because like whenever I was like 17 years old, like I had like my first girlfriend, and like I couldn't have sex. Like it's the first, I'd never even like realized until I was in that moment. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this isn't like working. Right. And so, 17 years old too. So I'm like, what the hell is going on?
Happened at 17.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. I mean, again, luckily I had the fear of God in me. So I wasn't like I was kind of hooligan anyways. So
maybe it was the fear of God, not the...
It might have been the fear of God. He might have been, yeah, he might have had the hold on it. But I think I went in and got my numbers tested. Like, and this was also right after I'd lost weight. So I'm sure things maybe rebalanced. But like, you know, in terms of like the numbers go, I think it was like 127 nanograms per deciliter or whatever nanograms per deciliter. Yeah. Yeah. So like 100 and did not have any thyroid. It was like super, super low. But at the time they just didn't do anything about it. Like I'm trying to think back on it right now because like my hormone journey has been a huge part of the last 3 years. But like at the time, I think they maybe just said like, oh, it's because you lost a lot of weight. It'll come back. And then it continued to be a minor problem in my life for a while. And then once I got down to Austin, it's kind of like enough was enough. And I started to really struggle with like motivation and just like depression and things. And I in my mind was like, a lot of this has to be related to maybe what's going on. And I went and got my numbers tested again, and it comes to find out that my total testosterone was like in the acceptable range, like by numbers. It was like 300 or something, right? So like doctors wouldn't say anything, but they had never tested my free testosterone, which was literally like, and I don't know the range for that. I'm sure you do, but like it was like 0.8.
Yeah, that's
whatever. It should be like 3.6 to like 12 point something, right? And so it didn't even exist. And so like, and I've heard that like that's what makes your testosterone like usable.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyways, tons of hormone issues there. But now that I'm on testosterone, I'm like, why didn't I wish I was going to wait until I was like in my 30s, but now I wish I would have done it younger, just because like I may just be one of these people who struggles with it, right, for one reason or another. So,
well, that's like a broader point. Like I've had these conversations with people before where, like, if you don't have a moral or ethical or health related reason why you wouldn't want to take TRT or any kind of like hormone replacement, like if you have below standard or below normal levels of hormones, you need to go on hormone replacement therapy. Like it will improve your life significantly. And I think people just assume that there's like a health risk or a greater health risk associated with taking something like exogenous, like TRT, like exogenous testosterone.
mm-hmm.
They don't also understand that having low or below average levels of those hormones is also dangerous. Like it's deleterious. You're putting yourself at risk for health issues that are related to having suppressed levels of those hormones. So it's like having average or at least average, if not above average levels of testosterone or any kind of other hormone, thyroid hormone or growth hormone, whatever. That's good. You need that. Your body needs that shit to function normally. Much less like if you're someone who is active or who needs to be performing above average, like if you're very into fitness or, if you are a fucking CEO and you have like this very high paced, high activity, high drive lifestyle, like if you're running on 4 hours of sleep and like slamming fucking grams of coffee a day, like your shit's probably going to be pretty fucked. And then if it's like you're going to be really not performant. So people just don't understand that shit. And again, I'm not a doctor and I'm not going to like prescribe anything to people. I'm not going to tell them what to take. But my general recommendations are like, dude, if you are ever considering going on this shit, like if you would go on it at 30, you might as well just go on it at 26 or 27, especially if you're already starting to suffer from some of those issues of having low.
Yeah. It's actually funny because this just reminded me about like some of the first times that we hung out in Columbus. You were trying to convince me to like start like, dude, just start taking testosterone, like just do it. And I'm like, oh no, I'm not. I read somewhere online that I should be 30 before I do it but I was already struggling. But I also think too, like taking a very like natural, like, cause I'm even taking enough, like I'm at like 200 a week or whatever. Again, I'm so bad with the labels of things, but like that's not going to take me out of like where my levels were, out of like an unnatural range, right? And I think I go back to what you said. It's like, how many things do we do all the time that maybe add value to our life, but like could, have some additional risks, right? I mean, it's like, and I think that for something like this, where it's like, again, like avoiding the negatives of what would happen if your numbers are low, not just health-wise, but I think also decision-making wise. Like that's even been one thing that I've noticed, like I have like more self-regulation, like more autonomy. It's like, you know what I'm saying? It's like, I just operate as like a better human being, which, just trickles down to every decision I make in every area. So yeah, I'm definitely team take the T now.
Well, people I've found are extremely contradictory in what they express to be like their risk tolerance versus what they actually are.
Oh yeah.
It's just, they like to virtue signal with certain things. It's like certain things are either like their hill that they're going to die on, whereas other things are like, it's so much easier to just brush off, right? Like there will be some people that will say like, bro, I'm never going to eat meat because meat causes cancer. But then they'll like drive a motorcycle,
Yeah.
Like, it's like, okay, that seems a little bit contradictory.
Like get drunk every weekend.
Yeah. It's like, people will express like their health risk tolerances, or they'll try and virtue signal with those things. But then like the other aspects of their life, like they're not consistent with that. I think that testosterone or any kind of like hormone replacement, or even like if we're talking about like super physiological levels, right? So like a bodybuilder or anyone, I guess you could say, abusing these types of hormones, these types of drugs, usually the people that give them the most shit are the ones that are going out on the weekends and getting hammered at bars. It's like, you have to figure out where your spectrum is. Like, is it like an ethical issue? You're talking about a health issue, right? Because if it's a health issue, you have to look in the mirror as well, and you have to start like really tidying up your shit. If it's a moral or ethical issue, you have to like really figure out why you have an ethical issue with someone who's taking something like testosterone but not cheating in a sport or not lying about it, right? Like you're super fucking open. You're like, yeah, I take TRT. I'm really open about the fact that like I also take TRT. So like I'm not competing in a sport. I'm not cheating anyone out of anything. But there will still be people that will look at us and automatically have this like internal feeling of like resentment because they see us as like cheating. And I'm like, what are we cheating? Like we're improving our life. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We're living a better life because of this. Like I definitely know that I have more energy. Like I feel better. I look better. Like I recover better. Like I'm able to sexually perform better. Like those types of things. Like I feel much more like a healthy male should at 29. Granted, like, do I love giving myself a shot? No, it sucks. Like,
here's what I was gonna say. I'm on the subcutaneous life now, and it's awesome.
Really?
Oh, because I was already doing like peptides, like some peptides. So now that because I'm like doing that is so easy. You do it twice a week, and so that was actually one of the things I was like, who's gonna jab me with this big ass needle? And like, I'm such a pussy. I'm gonna fucking do it myself. But now that you can just do a subcutaneous, it's almost fun. I almost get excited to do it.
Dude, I honestly hate sub-Q shots more than I hate intramuscular.
What?
Wait, all right, so
This demented shit.
It's not a pain thing, all right? I feel like sub-Q shots are annoying. They're annoying because they're just painful enough to be like a bee sting where I'm like, I just don't like this. Like this is unenjoyable to me. And especially like I take growth. Like I just take like a replacement level of growth, and I've been doing it for like a while now, but just like 2 IUs a day whenever I remember, which is honestly not all the time. But like for me, I've gotten so fucking over giving myself sub-Q shots in the morning. I'm like, I hate this more than anything. Like I'll literally open my fridge and just like see like the vial of growth sitting there, and I'm like, like I'm not today. Like it takes 30 seconds. I'm like, I'm not doing this shit. Like I don't want to do it. And so funny because like the IM shots, I feel like at this point, like I don't like doing them, but they're infrequent enough, at least in my to the point where I'm like, I can suck it up and do an IM shot.
Yeah.
Something annoying as fuck about a sub-Q shot.
Yeah. Makes you feel something. One of those shark needles. Yeah. No. If I had to do, now I will say, whenever I was doing like the peptides, like the CJC 1295 for a while, which like now looking back, I'm like, just take testosterone. It's like 1,000 times more expensive than testosterone too. And it's like, that would help you so much more. But with that, you did it every single day. So if I had to do it every day, that maybe would change my mind. But 2 times it works out. So,
dude, isn't it funny how people come up with every excuse to not take steroids? Like they'll take hormonal, they'll take peptides, they'll take like all of these other fucking things that are honestly more expensive, more dangerous, more unregulated.
Yeah,
it's taking testosterone, but like people will come up with every fucking excuse, every way to perform mental gymnastics to say that, oh no, I'm still natural. I'm not like taking PEDs. I'm just taking this random fucking peptide blend that I got that is basically doing the same fucking thing.
Yeah, I think it's a conspiracy theorist, honestly. I mean, it obviously, especially in the fitness. Well, so for me, like first off, my hips are way too wide to win any bodybuilding competition. So it's already out of the window, right? Like there's no way this isn't I don't have the Frank Zane look, right? And so that goals were already shattered. So like, since I think I literally could give like 0 fucks about powerlifting, bodybuilding, like anything, just personally, right? Like I think that like I maybe jumped over it, but it's funny though. I do remember like whenever I was really into it, like how big of a deal it was. And I always think through like how it started and even like the fear mongering around it too. And it has to be from like more of the like people taking like insane amounts, right? Because I haven't even done much of the research on like what's what I'm taking. I mean, I've done some, right? But like it's also whenever I look into it, I'm like, it doesn't really look like there's that much bad stuff going on at all for the amount that I'm taking, right? Like there's not really any. It's usually like the extremes. Yeah. Anything else.
So what happens is like whenever you have any kind of media campaign, so it's the same thing, and we can actually talk about this here in a second, like psychedelics and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But anytime there's like a coordinated media campaign to demonize anything, the public perception gets warped so far that all of a sudden that thing is deemed bad, even if they don't know what that thing really is, right? So like you can see this, I think it was like in the 20s where there was like the reefer madness stuff where like everyone was terrified of weed, right?
Yeah.
And like in the 60s and early 70s, it was psychedelics because psychedelics were like an anti-war associated thing, right? So like the government had an incentive to demonize psychedelics because people who were doing psychedelics were like commies and they were anti-war, and they were once protesting, and they were
thinking too much.
Yeah, they were thinking too much, right? But then with PEDs, with like testosterone and growth hormone and all those things, and all of like the more chemical names that people don't actually know what they are, like, you know, decadurabolin and anadrol and like, you know, dianabol, all of these things. So in the 90s and early 2000s, it was big in sports, right? So like the Olympics, Major League
Baseball. Yeah.
So like all of these scandals started to happen from, I mean, I would say it was probably like 90s, like early 2000s, whenever it was starting to get really big, and like Lance Armstrong. So like it was prevalent in every fucking sport. But because there were like these coordinated media campaigns to demonize all these athletes and paint them in a picture of liars, cheaters, like, you know, they're like swindling everyone out of money, and like they're not actually like what they're portraying. They're not actually, you know, like superstar athletes. They just got there because they were cheating, right? So then that like really demonized. Well, it was probably a little bit before that, but like I think that especially like bodybuilding was still niche enough, like in the 70s, 80s, like there weren't enough people really doing like PEDs on a grand scale to where everyone started to notice. But I think it was like the PEDs infiltrating major league sports and the Olympics to where people, okay, we have to take a stand on this. They're really bad. We can't allow this to continue to happen. So all of a sudden, PEDs were associated with bad, with cheating, with lying, and all these things. So then I think that's where like the virtue signaling has started to like prop up now.
Yeah. Well, also too, it's probably been, and I jump into this to where like, you know, the accessibility of being able to like with me, like I have a teledoctor there in Florida, like, and they do order, like it's, I think that accessibility has not really ever been something that was there too. And so like, you know, your heroes are doing testosterone. So now kids are trying to take testosterone and they're doing it the wrong way. What are they actually getting? What's the quality of these things, right? And so it's like, you know, I can see where that whole thing came from. But now I think especially like, you know, with testosterone levels plummeting, which is a whole other conspiracy theory that I definitely think is something real that's going on right now. And like, you know, I think it's becoming more and more of like an accepted thing for the general public. But
well, dude,
maybe it is.
Well, I don't know about the conspiracies, but I do want to talk about like the just general drug use, like recreational drugs, because like I feel like this is how
I love drugs.
This is how we started to get to know each other, was exclusively through our love of recreational drugs. That's how our bond just born back in the day. But no, like it's funny because we've had like our goblin years where we've just been like very degenerate. And I don't know if we're necessarily past that, but I feel like I'm starting to like be in like my moonlight era, right? Where I'm starting to get, I'm like, all right, you know what? Like, I don't really need to be doing this anymore. Like, this is fun, but like, I need to be a little bit more purposeful about it. And like the purposeful, I feel like the natural arc of like being purposeful with drug use is starting to like shift more to like, okay, like what is like the psychedelic scene, like the directed psychedelics scene? The more like ceremonial psychedelics, like what does that look like to be done in a way that is like actually useful, productive, safe, meaningful, right? So my first real like experience with purposeful drug use was the mushroom ceremony that we did a couple of years ago.
Wait, was that really? That was like the first like setting like that?
Yes, that was the first. Yeah. That was the first time I had done psychedelics in like a structured setting like that. And was that not for you?
I had done them actually. Now that I think about it, I guess in terms of like there's a shaman watching over it. Like I had like with my friend, and he talks about him openly too. Like Sean McDevitt, fitness shaman. Never like him and I have done like moments with like doing mushrooms where like the goal isn't just to get fucked up. Like the goal was like for him and I to like spend time together, then like talk through things or whatever. So I guess in terms of a full on organized thing, I guess you're right. Actually, that was my first like. There's a shaman here. And it's kind of more of like a spiritual kind of approach to it versus just like two dudes getting high kind of a thing. So yeah.
And it was, I'm sure that you can probably also echo this, but it was a completely different experience from what I had before with any kind of recreational drug, well, especially psychedelics too, because that was like, it was just very, I mean, obviously psychedelics are hard to explain, but it was just very like unified. I don't know if that's like the best way to put it, but I felt very much like I was in tune with like every single person there. Like you and I had like a really random, like goofy ass.
Bro, if it wasn't for me and if it wasn't for you, it'd be for you. We would have zapped off into the somewhere else. We were like,
yeah, I know. Yeah, we'd have been like James, man.
Yeah.
But like that was one of those things where I think we would both say it was like difficult in the moment. Like it was a difficult thing to go through. But on the other side of it, you're like very happy that you went through it, especially with like the people that you did it with. And then like you just form like a bond and attachment with those people. It's almost like not a trauma bond, but it's like we just went through something difficult together. And like we learned a little bit more about each other. And like this is cool. Like this is something we're going to keep forever. It's like an experience that like we're always going to cherish. And I know that like I felt like that very much afterwards. It always sounds so spiritual and like kind of like metaphysical talking about it in those ways. But like anyone who has done those types of ceremonies or like more like ritualistic psychedelic experiences, I feel like we like echo that. But you
can't avoid it.
What do you say?
I said you can't. Because I'm very much like not woo-woo or traditionally very anti-religion, right? But I think once you start to experience them, there's no other way to explain the certain things, right? And so,
and yeah, that's also something that I've talked about before. Like I'm not religious, but like because of my experiences with psychedelics, it's hard for me to say that I'm not spiritual, because like once you have those experiences, there's really no way to explain being in that realm or like being in that frame of experience. It's just so different. But like recently you did a little bit more, right? So like back then we did a mushroom ceremony. Recently you did Bufo. So do you want to explain like kind of what that is?
Yes, and I will do my absolute best to use words for something that has no words at all. But so for people listening, so Bufo, so it's a chemical called 5-MeO DMT. So it's a version of DMT. I think like most DMT that used recreationally is like RR or NN DMT or something. And so this is actually different compound. Like even they said like this is actually less like that DMT. Like normal DMT is more like a normal psychedelic than this is, just for what it does. And it's just weird. It's like if you go out to like Arizona and going down through like Central America, like there's just toads that there's literally signs that say don't lick the toads because it's their poison. Yeah. Right. And so, but basically this has been used for, thousands and thousands of years, especially like in Native American cultures. It's kind of like a passage for like boys to become men. And you do this. So, but yeah, so I, worked with, two people here in Austin to do it. And it's really funny because like, and I still struggle with this a bit, but like it took a long time for me to get to the point of actually doing it. And, they said, it was all part of the ceremony. The medicine was already working things, which I was always like, okay, yeah. I mean, I'm still a little bit like that, but it was one of those things where like there were a lot of things that had to happen in my life for me to be able to actually go in and do the ceremony. And so, when you do this, so it's smoked, right? And people had explained it to me before. People talk about how it's like you basically like experience death, like you actually die, right, and get through it. And even conceptually, it's hard. No one knows what that is because if you die, you're done, right? So it's like we can't really, the relationship we have with death is very strange. But a lot of people talk about how this like any fear of death that they had is gone. Yeah. Like, or it's like significantly reduced. And so I went into it, I mean, again, not really knowing what to expect. And I had done the DMT before, kind of more like recreationally, right? And, it's wild and whatever, but like, that's sort of what I was expecting going into it. But man, like this was without a doubt the most impactful thing that I've ever done. And it's crazy because it was 2 hours long. But in this experience, and it kind of has brought me even closer a little bit to like this, there's more going on than I can conceptualize in my brain, because it took me to this place where So basically, I did a couple of rounds of it, and like the first round, I inhaled, and then whenever you do it, like it's done. Like I never exhaled. I just fell back, and in that moment, like again, words can't describe it, but it was such a like I'm not there anymore. Like I was gone, right? But I was having this full on physical experience, and the people I was with, like there was noises. Their voices almost sounded like satanic a little bit, but not in an evil way. It just was I felt very much in this different like layer, I guess, of existence that was sort of timeless. Yeah. Like it was like I felt connection. Like it's again, I hate saying these things because whenever people say them to me, I'm always like, what the fuck are you talking about? But like I felt connected to like ancestors, like people, like in my lineage, and also like connection to like versions of myself. Because whenever I set my intentions, I had to create these different versions of myself, and they were there with me, like the 15-year-old Carter who was like gaining all of that weight, right? And like all these different versions of myself. And like whenever I did it in the first round, like it felt like I was in this echoing chamber. But all of a sudden, I remember once I started to have some like senses come back, there was like screaming. And I'm like, what is going on? Like there was like screaming happening. And then eventually I realized, oh wait, that's me screaming. Like I was full on primal screaming, which is like hilarious to me conceptually, because I would absolutely never in a million years do anything like that, right? Yeah. But what it showed me was like how much underlying just like everything I was holding on to with like anger and shame and things, like just the physical release of it. And the second round I did, it was the full on, like, I mean, you can call it an ego death, but I feel like it was more than that. It was just like the feeling of death, like life. It's so but like non-existence. But anyways, I mean, we could go into that farther, but I know we're coming up at the end of the time, so I'll just go back into why I think it was so impactful. And why like I love those types of things is because I think that especially for someone like me, I'm very much a head type, and I think a lot of people are in their heads about things. Like we're so far removed from our bodies and how our bodies regulate our mind, right? And like after this experience, like it's funny how like I don't have my life's purpose anymore. Like I don't, like it's not like it gave me all the answers. Yeah. But then I feel like my body and my mind have this interconnectedness now, where like decision making is easier than it's ever been, and like problems that are problems in my mind aren't as big as they once were. And like does that make sense? Like
it makes complete sense to me, and because I've had these experiences, it's very hard to explain to anyone, and I don't think it's necessarily for you to explain to people who haven't experienced it, because it's never going to resonate until you actually have been in that position or been to those places and experienced those things. Which is honestly one of the reasons why I recommend that people try and go into psychedelics with an open mind. It's very easy to associate things like LSD and DMT and psilocybin and even ketamine with things like crack and heroin. It's like people don't necessarily have like an intimate relationship with drugs. I hate to say it like that, but people have maybe never been like behind the scenes in like the drug world. Probably just lump all drugs under the category of drugs. There's not too much distinction there. But things like psychedelics, man, it's like, they can like fuck you up and make you schizophrenic and like put you into psychosis for sure. Like that isn't always a risk, but like at the same time, they can open up just a different world to you, and they can, like you said, they can eliminate fears that have always plagued you. Like they can allow for that release of energy that you've been holding on for your entire fucking life. Like they can show you different paths that you can take in the future that you otherwise would have been terrified to actually do. It's so fucking hard to explain something like that to people until they...
And two, I think with our friendship and like a lot of our friends, right? Like, there's like some goblining. It's like some degeneracy, right? Because you're also stimulated, and that feels really fun, right? But also, but it's this moment where it's like we're adults, and now we're all children. It puts you in this. But in a sense, not like you're being stupid. But like you go back to this childlike energy, but with people who are like adults and intelligent and these moments, and I don't know, like it creates this like a level of connection with people that you can't, I don't know how you can create that outside of, unless everyone's open to the idea, but like it puts everyone in the same connected place where like you can actually have vulnerable conversations or even just build levels of connection with one another that could never otherwise would have been there. Right. And it's why like in relationships, like I am like, you know, I planned it out. Like me and the girl I'm talking to now, like planned out me and her doing an MDMA session together.
Yeah.
Just to like have that. And it's incredible. Right. And then like, I think that again, you know, when these tools are used as tools versus like things of escape or whatever, they can be incredible tools. Right. And help us train our mind in amazing ways. So I'm very team drug. And I was also very thankful that I'm very team drug, but I also wanted to say just to you right now, like I'm very thankful that like my introduction to all of that stuff was like you and like Ben, like friends who like do things and do it appropriately. And like, I'm just very thankful for that because I missed any opportunity to like fuck myself up. Right. And like find myself in a bad situation, which is the real thing. Right. But yeah, I just want to say thank you to that because you definitely, you got me into it in a very like responsible way that allowed me to really just have all the benefits without a lot of the negatives.
Well, just to add on that really quick, because like we definitely have to go, but it's important to be around like the right group of
yeah.
Like it's just as important as being in the right frame of mind and doing the right drugs. Being around the right people and like having the right setting is so fucking crucial to being able to do these things in like a healthy way and a productive way. Like we've been lucky enough to have an absolutely fucking awesome friend group that is all super open-minded. They're all very understanding, very comforting. Like we know that even if something weird were to come up, it's okay because everyone has some fucked up shit that might come up at any given point, right? And like you said, that kind of return to childhood or like infancy where all of your barriers are broken down. But think about like the people that are in our friend group, specifically our friend group. These are all very high-powered, high-functioning, intelligent, successful people. And in a lot of ways, like they're forced to be in control of every aspect of their life at every second of the day. And that is so fucking overwhelming and taxing to think about. But doing things in a structured way like this, like, you know, a psychedelic ceremony, like that allows you to safely remove all of those controls from your life and just kind of like sink back into, all right, this is who I actually am. Like, let's let's remember who we are, you know? Like, let's try and get to the bottom of like what we need to be doing, what our purpose is, like what we're trying to do in the world and like what we want to do in the world and like the things that we value. And like, for me, it's always been difficult, but rewarding in the sense that whenever I've had like these very powerful drug experiences, it's sometimes not fun in the moment or like going through it, you know, but it's cliche as it is. Like you always are taught something. You always learn something about yourself on the other side, right? Sometimes it's not always good shit, but like you learn something about yourself. And I think that over time, like you just start to really form a more complete picture of who you are without all of like the bullshit narratives and stories that you tell yourself over your entire fucking life that eventually you just become convinced of a lie, you know? But it's so easy to tell yourself a lie over and over and over again from the time that you're like a teenager and then you're an adult.
Grooves.
Grooves. Yeah, that's what it is, dude. But like psychedelics like fucking erase those grooves, man. Like they kind of like wipe the slate clean. And I think that's where you can really see the benefits, especially if they're done correctly, which I think that we should reiterate here. Talking about,
I think the title of this, the title should be "Do Drugs, Just Don't Be Dumb."
That's going to be the title, 100%.
That's really it. Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. Do you want to plug yourself real quick? Tell people where they can find out more about you.
Yeah. So,
drop your email that you sent me, by the way. Drop the email. You can tell people where to find you there.
The email. Oh my gosh, I can't even remember what it was. I crack so many grid jokes that I can't remember all of them, Bryce. They get stuck in my mind. Well, I don't even remember what it was. But for anyone who does actually want to go where I'm going and not the probably the porn site I directed you towards, it would just at Carter Good on Instagram. It's probably the best place to find me. A lot of fitness stuff there, but I'm also sharing more of this stuff on there now too. So if you're interested in that, I'm slowly dipping my feet into that a little bit to show more of my experiences there. So
I definitely think that you should do more of that. just hearing you talk about it, I think that you have something to add there.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. Thank you so much again for doing this. And we should definitely do it again sometime soon. Maybe talk about more goblin shit.
Yes, absolutely. Hope we should do it down here in Austin.
All right. Fair enough. All right. Thank you so much.